All right, everyone. We're here with another episode of Public Relations Declassified live stream, and we're doing something a little bit different today. We are streaming both to the group and to my Facebook feed. So hopefully the tech gremlins don't get us here too badly today. I'm hoping everything works out fine on that end, but let us know in the comments, and we'll go from here. All right, so wanted to touch on a few things here today. First thing we're going to talk about is some of the change that's coming to the media industry and what we need to do to adapt. So some of you guys may have heard me talk about some of this recently. There was something called Operation Mockingbird. This is something that has been declassified for a long time. It was a program that the CIA did, and it relates to the media. Essentially, there was an issue with some reporters back in I believe it was in the 50s, reporting stuff that the CIA did not want them to report. And the CIA started doing things to get their tentacles into the media. I'm going to play a little video here for you guys so you have kind of a sense of what we're talking about here.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the trouble in sharing irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 All right, so that kind of gives you guys an idea as to what's going on. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen where you see these kind of coordinated messages going out in the media. This is not like this is a documented thing. CIA documents have been declassified for a really long time. But I want to point out this also doesn't only apply to traditional media. This also applies to social media. In fact, Facebook actually has its origins in DARPA. For those of you who are not familiar with that, that is the Defense Advanced Research projects. Basically, they go in and they create all the super high tech, crazy advanced stuff that the military and intelligence communities use. Facebook basically was born out of that. If you're curious about that, go look into a program called LifeLog that they were rolling with, which DARPA shut down literally on the day that Facebook launched. So you do the math on that. So why are we talking about this, government involvement in the media and social media, particularly the media in this case, right? So why does this even matter? Well, if you're trying to get featured in the media, you have to understand the game that you're in, the game that you're actually playing, right? You play the game you have, not the game that you wish you had. So there's been some recent developments. I talked about some of the stuff with U.S. aid, which has played a role in a lot of the funding for a lot of media outlets. What you're going to start to see, and I've covered bits and pieces of this over the last few weeks, you're going to start seeing a lot more layoffs in the media. And that's going to mean there's fewer journalists to potentially feature you and your story in the media. So what this means is everything's going to get a lot more competitive. Your pitches are going to have to be a lot better. You're going to have more social proof than ever. And you're going to have to invest a lot more time, resources, and energy into, building and nurturing the relationships with these journalists. So media still has a valuable place in marketing, right? It still helps to position you as an authority in your field. It still plays a huge role in getting out there in front of the right people, kind of getting you positioned as the expert on whatever it is that you do, right? And then you leverage that into your other marketing channels. But in order to do that, things are getting more competitive. You're going to have to put in more work to get there. But that means so does everybody else as well. And I think what's going to happen is we know that most people are lazy. We know that most people don't want to put in the work to do what they need to do. So as things get more difficult, you'll see a lot of fall off. And to put this in perspective, I was talking at an event a couple of months ago, and I shared a statistic that almost nobody had heard, unsurprising if you're not in the media world, but the ratio of publicists to journalists is 6-1. And when you think about it this way, right, every publicist has multiple clients that they're pitching for. So they're sending a lot more than just, a pitch here and there. They're sending a lot of pitches to all of these journalists. And then also factor in all of the other entrepreneurs out here who are trying to DIY their own PR. So there's a lot of noise out there for journalists. As the number of journalists starts to drop, then what happens is fewer journalists are now getting more pitches, right? So it's going to make it a lot harder to cut through the noise. And if you want to be the one that does, you're going to have to put in more work. You're going to have to be more creative. You're going to have to be more persistent. You're going to have to spend more time building those relationships. And we're going to talk in some of the coming episodes about some of the different ways that you can do that. All right, so we're going to jump on to the next topic here. We're going to talk about how to ace your next podcast interview and demonstrate your expertise. So being a guest on a podcast is a great way to get out there. Oh, apparently I'm just getting a notification that we're not streaming into the group for some reason. All right, well, if you're listening in and you're not seeing it in the group, you can still go ahead and catch us over on YouTube, X, and LinkedIn as well. And then also this is streaming to my personal profile as well. So any of those, if you guys aren't seeing this right now or aren't hearing it, you can pop in through any of those platforms. All right. So jumping back to the podcast thing, basically, this is a great opportunity to really showcase your knowledge, your expertise, and what makes you unique, what makes you stand out in a different way than a TV segment might, or an article in, Fox Business or Entrepreneur Magazine or something like that, because you have the opportunity to really go deep into a topic, right? You can talk about all the little nuance because you've generally got, it's going to be like a 30-minute to a 60-minute podcast interview, in some cases even longer. This gives you an opportunity to say a lot of the things that you would not get to say in a traditional media opportunity, right? So now you can really demonstrate your expertise in a powerful way, but also you have the opportunity to really show who you are as a person. And that's the thing that gets people to really connect and engage with you. And that's a powerful advantage there that you don't really get in a 3-minute TV segment or, a few lines that you're quoted in, the Wall Street Journal or something like that. So I want to outline some steps that you guys can take to really make sure you crush that opportunity. And the first is start off before you even get to the point of the interview. You want to listen to at least 3 episodes of that podcast, start to finish, right? You want to get as much information out of each of those episodes as you can. Now, what you're doing when you do this is, first of all, you're giving right out of the gate, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, you're giving by boosting their stats, right? Those downloads help them to reach more people, help them to rank higher in some of the aggregators. It also helps them to sell more advertising, right? Because the more people that are listening to their podcast, the more valuable that airtime is for advertisers. And then when you're doing this, one of those 3 episodes, I recommend you make it their first episode, right? Those of you who have had a podcast or are currently podcasters, you know that most people never hear the first episode of a podcast, right? Maybe some of their friends and family might hear it, but outside of that, almost nobody's going to hear it. If you've got some huge brand, you've got a massive audience in general, and then you start a podcast, sure, people are going to hear right out of the gate. But for most normal people, when you start a podcast, you don't have an audience, you don't have any kind of reach or exposure. And in the beginning, you're kind of, talking into the void. So when you go back and listen to their first episode, that's going to give you some insight as to also how they've kind of grown and developed as a podcaster and as a person, really. So this is a really great way to extract a lot of information out of who they are, what they stand for, and how they carry themselves. That's going to help you in your interview. So you may find as you listen to some of these episodes that there are certain questions that they often ask. And maybe you weren't prepared for those questions, but now you are. But the key here is you want to make sure that you don't over prepare, right? You don't want to try to have some answer that's perfectly scripted and, you're reading it like you're reading off of a teleprompter and it sounds horribly robotic, right? That's a bad approach. So you want to just have a natural answer, but you're going to get a lot of insight as to what they may ask or what they may want to talk about, what they may bring up. It's also going to give you a lot of other interesting conversation topics or stories that you might be able to bring up. In which case, bring up specific details. Maybe they were talking about something that happened to them in their childhood, or a major obstacle they overcame, or some kind of major accomplishment they made, right? Find a way to work that into the conversation. Bring it up and ask them a question about it. Or, if you're talking about something and you see a similarity in something from their stories, use that as an opportunity to kind of tie their experiences with your experiences. And this is a great way to, not only create some more engagement here, but also you're building more rapport. And as you guys are communicating in this way, it almost seems like, two old friends talking, right? And that helps to build more trust with the audience. And it also highlights them because you took the time to go and research them, who they are, what they do, what they've been through, all of that. And you're bringing up this stuff. It kind of, elevates them a little bit. And of course they love that. Their audience loves that. And it's a good thing to do. It helps you, it helps them, and it helps the listeners. When you do that though, you want to mainly highlight them, not, let's say they were talking to a guest about a thing. Don't bring up the old guests as much, more focus on them. Now, there's certainly a time and a place to bring up the guests, and that could be beneficial for the podcast host as well, because they can, certainly share that episode and then mention that guest was brought up in there, right? And they might even tag that guest. So you're bringing more value by, creating a more multifaceted conversation, right? There's more nuance to it. There's more angles. There's more different ways that this goes into other topics. But then also that can lead to more exposure, and that may lead to a connection with that other guest if you don't already know that person. So a lot of opportunities come out of this. In doing that, or actually prior to doing that, one of the things you should do is really dig deep into their background. So one of the things I recommend is identify 3 key accomplishments that they've made. Identify at least one major obstacle they've overcome. And then as you're having these conversations, look for ways to draw parallels between some of the things you're going through or have been through or want to go through to their similar situations, right? So this is a great opportunity to really get out here and create depth and engagement to the conversation that helps them, but it also makes you shine. Something else that you can do, and I highly recommend this in all cases, because what it does is it takes the listeners from just kind of being passive listeners into being an engaged part of your audience. And that is create something valuable that they can give away to their audience. Now, this has to be actually valuable, right? This has to be something that provides real value. So, let's say you run a SaaS company. You don't want to give away a free 30-day trial. Right? There's almost no value in that. There's not really, people aren't going to get much out of that. That's something you probably offer to everybody anyway. So it's not really seen as anything special or anything impressive. So instead, sticking with the SaaS model, What you might do is maybe you do a full featured 6-month free trial that they have the opportunity to do that. And maybe you even do an onboarding program where you show them how to use that software, how to maximize its impact in their business. And if your software is truly valuable, you go through this process, they start using it, and it's doing something beneficial for their company. By the end of that 6-month trial, they're going to want to keep it, right? So they're likely going to turn into a paying client from that point on, right? So another approach, like let's say you don't run a SaaS company. Let's say you're a service-based business. You've got a lot of information that other people don't have. You know how to do certain things that other people don't know how to do. You've probably got frameworks and workshops and all these different things that you do with your clients to help them improve in some way. We've got a bunch of things like this. So basically what you do is you take and turn this into an informational product. So this might be a PDF, right? We've got one. I was at a mastermind speaking a couple of months ago, and I gave away this. We've got this PDF guide, and it's basically a series of questions that takes people from not knowing how to really present themselves to having this nice, tight, concise, what I call a core positioning statement. Basically, it's an encapsulation of everything about, what they do, who they are, why they do what they do, how they kind of got from point A to point B into this tight little message, right? Just usually, 3 to 5 sentences, something in that range. Nice, tight, and powerful. But I talk to people all the time who are like, well, I don't really have a good story, right? There's nothing powerful. This is what I do. I don't have anything exciting. I don't have anything, that's a powerful way to say this. And as we run them through this series of questions, I think this is about it's about a 20 or 30 page workbook. As we run them through this and they start to answer these questions, almost every single person realizes, holy shit, I really do have an awesome story. I've got all this amazing stuff that I've been through and overcome to get where I am. And, I've got this particular passion for this mission. And as they start to answer it, it all comes together. We did a fun little exercise at that mastermind. In fact, I'm not sure if Tom is on here, but he was one of the people in that audience where basically once he finished going through that workbook, we then took that and distilled that down into his core positioning statement. And like, he was so excited about how that sounded because he's like, well, when I tell people what I do, I just tell them and people get it, they understand it, but it's not the same. And he's like, I get goosebumps when I read this. Right. So it puts emotion into you describing, what you do, why you do what you do, kind of who you are at a foundational level. And that's something that's incredibly valuable in every single interaction, right? We use it from a PR perspective because it helps us to really show how our clients are better and different than the other people that are pitching the media or the other people whose publicists are pitching the media on their behalf. And so it differentiates them in a way that helps them to get a lot more media coverage, but it's also something that they can use in their day-to-day business, right? They're having a conversation with someone, they're giving a presentation on stage, they're networking with somebody, whatever it is. This is a game changer for that. So that's an example of something that we give away in certain scenarios, like on a podcast, for example. When you can give something of substantive value like that, it puts you in a different category, but it also brings that person back into your ecosystem. So when you're just sitting on the podcast and talking, you've basically got that audience. They're listening to what you're saying. They're passive. And some may end up reaching out. The reality is a lot will not. But if you've got something valuable that you can offer to them, you can now bring them back and they're going to go fill out a form to get that thing. Now they're in your email list. Now you can start pulling them further into your ecosystem. Maybe you've got a Facebook group. Maybe you've got a low ticket paid group that you bring them into. There's a lot of things you can do to then further work them up the chain as far as the other offerings that you have. So this is a great way to do that. But if you're going to do it, it has to really bring value. It has to be something that they can use and get value out of in a way that moves the needle for their business even if they never buy anything or hire you to do anything ever beyond that point. And the other side of that is, think about it like this. If you offer this thing, right, and it's a free thing, you offer it to the audience, but it doesn't really help them. It's some basic information. The assumption they're going to make is that's what everything that you do is, right? It's all very basic. It's all very simple. It's all, surface level stuff. On the other hand, if you're giving away basically all of the information that there is, right? And I'm not saying to give away everything you know all in one shot, right? But you're going to take a very specific problem and give them a solution to that problem, right? So in the case of the PDF that I mentioned, it's a workbook that helps them uncover their story, right? So it doesn't tell them every single thing about PR. It doesn't tell them how to craft a great pitch. It doesn't tell them how to build relationships with journalists. It doesn't tell them how to build a press sheet. None of that. It tells them, answer these questions to basically uncover your story. So you're solving a very specific problem. And if you can do that and you do it in a complete way where you're giving them everything they need to do to solve that particular problem, that's going to position you as an absolute authority, right? And then brings them back further into your ecosystem where you can continue marketing to them. All right, so that's a wrap for the podcast segment. What we're going to talk about next here, I know we've got a lot of authors in the group. I see people launch books all the time, and I don't know if most people know this, but most books don't do well in a business sense. So one of the things we're going to address to help fix that is how to get some killer reviews ahead of time to crush your next book launch. So when it comes to publishing a book, this is something that I believe every entrepreneur should do because it does position you as an authority. And there's a few ways that it does that. First of all, it's just the fact that you have a book. Now, it has to be something useful, just like I was talking about with the giveaway when you're on a podcast. If you're publishing a useful book, right, not a 10-page thing, but something substantial, something that solves a particular problem. For a book, it used to be 50 to 60,000 words was the general rule of thumb for a business book. Nowadays, it seems like a lot of books are on the shorter side, 20 to 25,000 words, which works out to somewhere between 150 to 200 pages, something like that, just depending on the size of the pages. But about 20 to 25,000 words is a good target for a book. How many people do you know that have the discipline to sit down and finish writing 20 to 25,000 words? Most people don't have that. So just the act of writing the book and then going through the process of publishing, which, let's be honest, is a bit of a pain in the ass, even with all the technology that exists today and the simplicity that Amazon provides in that, there's still a fair amount of work that goes into that. So to get from an idea in your head to a book on Amazon is a substantial undertaking. So just having that already sets you apart from most people. And then from that point, though, that's where most people drop off. All right. So most books don't sell. Most books are not profitable. Most people don't sell. There's a specific number, and I cannot for the life of me remember, but most books do not sell enough to even break even from the time and effort and cost that you put into it. So if you want to change that, and let's set expectations here first. All right. You're not going to get rich by publishing a book in most cases. So what we want, though, is for there to be enough sales, at least to, cover expenses. But also we want this to become a more powerful asset to create that authority status, right? So one of the things that I see as a major flaw is most people don't get any reviews for their book, right? Look at most people who have published a book. They may have 1 or 2 reviews. A lot of people have none. There may be a few. For most people, it's low double digits. But if you get a lot more reviews, then that's going to change a lot of things. So it creates social proof. It's showing the world that other people find this information useful. Other people think that there's value in this, which will then make other people more likely to buy the book and review the book as well. The more reviews you have, that also boosts your authority status. And then the third part of this is where it's really challenging, and that's publicity. So book publicity is an entirely different beast. When it comes to getting media coverage for a book, it is damn near impossible unless you're a giant name that everybody's already familiar with. You know, you've got, Tony Robbins, Alex Hormozy, people like that. They're, of course, the kind of people who, if they publish a book, everybody wants to cover that. But if you're not one of those people, you're very unlikely to get media features, especially if you have no reviews on your book. So we want to maximize those reviews so that we can actually boost all aspects of that: the social proof, the authority status, and getting publicity for the book. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to build a list of referrers. Now, what do I mean by referrers? These are the people that the people who you want to buy your book look up to. So if you're running if you're writing a book on some aspect of business, you might want to find some business coaches. You might want to find some accountants who work primarily for business owners. You may want to find, maybe you've got financial planners who primarily work with business owners. You find these folks, and these are the ones who you want to get to review your book. We'll talk a little bit more about how to do that in a moment. But what we're going to do is start to organize that list. Now, if you're non-tech type of person, then keep it simple, right? Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets, something like that. If you are a little bit more technologically oriented, go ahead and use your CRM for this and set up a specific tag. And then this way, of course, you can automate some aspects of your outreach and engagement with these folks. If you're not technical, though, a spreadsheet will work just fine. It's a little bit more work, particularly on the manual side, but it can definitely be done. And then what we're going to do is make it easy for these people to refer you, or not to refer you, but rather to review your book. All right. And there's some things you're gonna do to make that as streamlined as possible for them. So you're not going to give them the whole book. Well, you will, but that's not going to be the focus. That comes later. What you're going to do is you're going to start off by asking them to read one chapter. All right. Anybody can read a chapter. It's low pressure. You don't have to be a person who loves to read to consume a chapter, especially if we're talking about one of these shorter books. I was talking with Brian Eisenberg yesterday, in fact, about his book that's coming out. And he was telling me that some of his chapters are as short as 300 words, right? So that's a huge way to make this incredibly easy for them to take that content, consume it, and get a pretty good gist for, the writing style, the value that it's providing, and kind of the direction that the book is going. So you're going to pick that chapter based on their background, their knowledge, their personality, all of that, right? So you know what's in that chapter, you're going to find the chapter that's going to make the most sense for that person to read and evaluate. You'll give it to them as a completely separate PDF. Might be one page, might be a few pages, however you've got that set up, however big it is, whatever. But you're going to make this dead simple. And then you can give them some bullet points on some key points within that chapter that you'd really like them to highlight on. So I've got a book coming out shortly, specifically around pitching and why pitching is not the key focus of PR. There's some, I'm not going to release all the details yet, but let's say there's a chapter in here on building relationships with journalists on X. So one of the things I might give to somebody as a bullet point when I want them to review that chapter is the power of building lists within X's native interface. So as he reads that chapter, he's going to catch some things And now he knows exactly what things to tie to that topic that I want him to focus on. Give him 3 to 5 bullet points for the chapter, some key things you want them to hit on. And they read this before they read the chapter. And then as they go through the chapter, they're going to identify certain parts of the book, certain parts of that chapter that are especially relevant to those particular bullet points. Makes it super easy for them to write a really relevant review without spending a ton of time. Because look, most people don't like to write. Most people are super busy. And most people are distracted by, our phones constantly dinging and emails coming in and people walking in and out of our office and events that we have to go to speak at, all of these different types of things. You set up a framework like this and they can sit down and read that chapter and write a quick review, 15 minutes max, right? It doesn't take a genius to do this, but basically you're giving them everything they need to give you exactly what you need without it being a lot of work on their part or frankly your part, right? Because you're basically giving them what's already created and then a couple of bullet points. So super simple, and it gives them the ability to help you without putting in a ton of work. Now, if you've already got your book printed, then I would absolutely advise sending them a signed copy, right? They will probably read it at some point, but this is another way to show your gratitude. And then they've also got this cool physical product that they can hold in their hands. They can lay it on their desk and take a photo of it. And that will add even more weight to it when they post a review. In fact, when they post a review, this is something I do with all of my friends who write books. When they write a book, first thing I will do is I will go to Amazon and I will buy it. A lot of times I'll get the book ahead of Amazon actually having it, whether it's in a digital form or a physical copy. But what I will always do is when I will post a review on Amazon, I include a photo of that physical book. And that does a few things. One, it adds additional credibility for them, right? I took the time out to buy this book and then go write a review and, here's a picture of it. So it shows that A, I have the book, but B, there's a graphical aspect to the review, which helps to draw some more attention to it. The other thing is, if you have them buy the book on Amazon, which a lot of your friends will, you can actually, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but you can actually drop the price temporarily during a pre-launch and they can purchase it for just a few dollars. But then what happens is next to their review, you'll see a little tag that says verified purchase. And that carries a lot of weight. Those will often be shown ahead of the other ones. And it's more credible because somebody actually bought it and it can be proven that they bought it, rather than just a lot of the random reviews, which may be great reviews, but it doesn't explicitly say that that was purchased. So another thing that you can do here, and I'm going to show you guys an example in a second. I did this with Brian's book, which I absolutely loved this book. You can create a review graphic, right? You can build a little template in Photoshop or Canva or whatever it is that you use for graphics. And then you tailor one of these to each of these people. So once they make their review and they let you know it's up on Amazon, you can go copy it from Amazon, or you can just, you can ask them to send you the text. Basically, you then build this little review template. So in this particular case, I've got, we've got the book cover over here, and then we've got my quote and a headshot and my name. Now, this is something that, this is one of Brian's older books. I read this one a few years ago. Great book, by the way, especially if you've got kids who you want to get involved in your business. This book does an amazing job of breaking all of the concepts of business down in a very simple to understand way. Basically, he uses storytelling, and there's a particular term, and I'm drawing a damn blank right now. But he goes through this process of explaining it through stories, right? He's not saying, hey, here's how to build a business, do this and do that, and he's using examples like the lemonade stand, like he's having these conversations. These two people are having a conversation about stuff, and that's basically how the book presents the information. So you create a little template like this, and you can create these images and then give them to those people. They don't share them until you give them the green light, but basically what happens is you've now got a all of these people who are going to be sharing these images on your actual launch day. So this is a powerful tool because it's going to create that visual representation of it, and everybody's going to see the people in their circle sharing this book, and everybody's got these different perspectives of what value they got out of it. And it's a great way to build a lot of buzz leading up to your launch. Now, we talked about the pre-launch side. You can set up your books to be purchased before they're actually ready, and people can also post reviews at that time. What I would suggest doing in this case is you drop your price, right? So whatever price you have planned during the pre-launch, you can actually drop that. So there's an exact number, and that number changes, so you'll have to look it up, and maybe Brian knows that. He can drop that in the chat if he's around. But there's a certain number that if your price falls below that certain number, and the last time I looked at it, it was $2 and change. I forget exactly what it was. But if your book price falls below that 2 and change, then those numbers do not count towards your sales volume, which means they're not going to count towards you earning bestseller status. So whenever you're getting ready to do your actual launch, make sure that you know exactly what that number is. And like I said, it changes regularly, so it's a moving target. But figure out what that number is, and it's available on Amazon's website. But identify what that number is, and just make sure your pricing does not go below that during your pre-launch. But what you're going to do here during the pre-launch is you're going to have all of your friends, all of the people from this list that we built earlier, they're going to purchase it from Amazon during the pre-launch at that reduced price. And like I said, it's only a few bucks, not a big deal. Anybody can handle that. They're going to buy it, and then they're going to post a review within anything from a few days to maybe a week later, right? And we want to do that because, let's be realistic. If somebody purchases a book right now and they post a review an hour later, we know they sure as hell didn't read the book. So we don't want to do that. We want to not trip up Amazon's algorithm that is trying to identify spam or bogus reviews. So we want to make sure that it's natural. So a few days to maybe a week is plenty of time for that. But since they have bought it and now they're reviewing it a few days to a week later, that should not theoretically trigger any kind of algorithm issues that would incorrectly suppress that review. And Amazon is pretty crazy about how they do this. There have been lots and lots of strategies that people have used to manipulate the reviews. So Amazon cracks down pretty hard on it, and sometimes that leads to false positives. So reviews often will get suppressed or deleted. So you want to make sure that that's not happening, and this is how you do that. All right, so this is something, like I said, all of you guys, I recommend publishing a book and then go through this process to get the reviews before you start really doing your full launch, because that's going to help not only you to get more sales volume, you're going to sell more books this way, but also when it comes time to start creating publicity for the book, you've already got some reviews on there. You've already got a lot of people saying that this is great, this is useful information. That's going to increase your chances of the media covering your book in some way. And then also it creates more social proof from the business side, right? If you're coming out presenting yourself as an expert on something, maybe you're a fractional CFO, maybe you're a leadership coach, whatever it is you do. If you're coming out here saying, hey, I'm an expert on leadership and I wrote this book about leadership and it's got, 50 reviews, 100 reviews, 500 reviews, whatever that number is, that puts you in a different category than the guy who's got, the book with 2 reviews and one of them is his mother, right? So you want to make sure that you're doing this right if you want to get the maximum impact from that effort. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about why you need a powerful origin story. Now, this is something I touched on earlier when I was explaining some of the stuff with the workbook that we used in that mastermind group, the thing that is actually a giveaway, but it's also something that we sell. Everybody has an origin story, but a lot of people don't realize that they do. So let's first talk about why this even matters. So when it comes to storytelling, storytelling activates a part of the brain that produces oxytocin. Now, if you're one of the science nerds like I was, did a lot of studying in science. I really enjoyed that subject. Oxytocin is basically the hormone in the body that inspires trust, right? So through storytelling, you're creating a biochemical reaction that starts to increase trust. And this is something that's hardwired into our brains because knowledge has basically been passed down through storytelling since the beginning of mankind. But it also helps people to relate. So they don't know that they don't know why to care. Excuse me. They don't care about what you do until they know why they need to know, right? So they also don't care about how your industry works. But the other side of this is storytelling builds hope. So, when I talk about, for example, what I went through, I had my health crisis. At the time I was running a successful marketing agency, and then my health crisis caused me to almost die. I spent 2 years on my deathbed, and then I used PR to put myself back on the map. And from there, everything blew up bigger and faster than it ever had before. And when people hear a story like that, and all of you guys have a story like that, whether you realize it or not, it may not be quite as intense. The details will be different, but I promise you that every one of you has a great story like this. So when people hear a story like that from you, you're giving them hope because they saw the situation where something was good or great or maybe okay, and then it got shitty. And then all of a sudden it's amazing because of something that happened. That gives them hope that the same thing can happen in their life. Now, there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, though. Now, we've all seen the internet marketing douchebags. Everything is all about them. And, they got the pictures of the Lambos and the boats and money pictures and all that. And they're really focused on ego. It's about them. It's about how amazing they think they are, about how amazing they think everyone else thinks they are, and all of this. But then you've got authentic marketers. And when they're telling their story, it's all about the people that they serve. So, we know the big names like Tony Robbins, Alex Hormozy, Kim Kiyosaki, people like that. And then we've got some of the smaller people. Some of them may actually be watching here right now, like Tom Kroll or Matt Andrews, David Phelps. These are people who they're not, on the, hundreds of millions of dollars range. They're not out here, at the Tony Robbins level, but they're at a very high level. But everything they do is authentic. They're sharing knowledge. They're sharing their story. They're sharing how their journey improved their life. But more importantly, they're sharing how you can then do the same thing, right? So how do we do the same thing? How do we come up with our origin story? Well, we're not creating it. We're distilling it. Like I said before, we've all got one of these stories. We've all got some powerful story about something that we overcame and how that changed us and how we are now helping more people because of that. So what you're doing is you're not creating the story, you're distilling it from what's already there. It exists. You just have to pull out all the irrelevant stuff. You have to pull out all the fluff and get it nice and tight. And then you have to make it nice and engaging and short enough that people don't want to just grab you by your shoulders and shake you and tell you to shut the fuck up. Now, you guys have already seen this hundreds and probably thousands of times already. If you want to take a guess where, it's Hollywood. All right. Hollywood has absolutely perfected this. Every single movie that you've seen, minus documentaries probably, but every major movie that you've seen has this similar plot line. And man, when I was putting this together, I was thinking of some of the movies that I would love to include. I'm going to probably do this as a separate video at some point and then have these clips from various movies. And I'm going to go through the whole thing a few times with each of these movies, like a sped up version of this. But the movies will start off like this. And I guarantee you, as I go through this outline, I guarantee you're going to think of a movie in your head and you're going to start to recount all of these scenes. And if you guys are picturing movies and scenes in your head as I start to describe this, I'd love to hear what movies you're thinking about. Because when I make another video on this specific topic, I'll try to include some of those movies and scenes in some of the examples. But all right, so picture this. Movie starts out. Everything is, like I said, good or great, or it's perceived as such, right? Everything's just the status quo, whatever. And then something happens to change that. There's some kind of disaster. There's some kind of problem that occurs. And the hero, the main character, they try to solve that problem, but they're not quite ready. Maybe they don't have the courage or the knowledge or the tools or the money or the resources, whatever it is. They don't have what they need to solve that problem right now. And then that creates a whole slew of other problems. So now they have to go on this side quest and they have to try to get what they need to solve that problem. And in that side quest, they're going to face a whole bunch of other challenges. And often they're going to experience significant loss along the way. They'll learn from this. They'll become better, faster, stronger, all of that. And often they'll also find that they have to help others overcome their challenges in this process as well, right? And then now they've got some new friends, new people kind of in the fight towards their challenge. Now they come back to the original problem, and often with the help of these new friends, they come in, they save the day, and everything ends up in a better place, right? And they're never going back to that old situation again, right? So I know that you guys all had some kind of movie in your head. Love for you guys to drop that in the comments. But that's the model, right? So look at this the same for yourself. Start off by asking, why do you do what you do? You guys have heard my story. I talked about it a little bit ago. Look at your situation though. Like, what were you doing before you moved into your role that you're doing now, right? How was your life? How was your business? How were your relationships? All of that. Then look at what problem motivated you to move into this role. What led to that change, that path? Now you want to look at what did you learn from the experience, both good and bad, right? Because a lot of times you go through something significant like that, it's going to change your perspective. It's going to open your eyes to new information. And then how do you now serve people in this new role, right? What unique insight do you have? Like, you're the person who's doing this. What do you know that other people who are just doing it because it's an interesting job or it makes good money or whatever, you're doing it for a different reason? What unique insight do you have as a result of going through this? How are you uniquely qualified? You've got your story. You went through this. You understand this in a way that others don't, right? Look at all of that information and then answer, what is your mission? And when you take all of this, put all of this together, you've now got that story. And then from this point, it's a matter of taking away what's not needed in that story. You want to get this refined down into a tight, maybe 3 to 5 sentences. Get a story that's compelling, it's engaging, it's powerful. It says, who you are, what you do, and why you do it, and who you do it for in a very powerful, concise way. And that's going to set you apart from probably 90% of the other people in your industry. In some cases, it may be because they're just doing it because it's a job. For other people, maybe they've got a similar story as yours. Maybe they've got a similar experience that led them to this, but they don't know how to convey that story. By you having this story, this powerful origin story, it's going to put you in an entirely different class, and it's going to give you a major advantage over your competitors, and it's going to help you to get featured in the media more often and more easily. So definitely put this together. We are going to be doing a workshop on this in the private community at some point soon here. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. You guys can drop a comment in the Facebook group. And then we're going to close up here with Jeremy's PR PSA today. So when you filter your message, you weaken your brand. And what we're talking about here is essentially, if you are trying to soften what you're saying, you're trying to make it more appealing to more people, or you are trying to make sure that you don't turn anybody off or alienate anybody, you make it to where nobody gives a shit, right? Because the things that are going to attract somebody to you are also the same things that are going to repel somebody else from you. So the things that will attract the right people by default will push away the wrong people. And that's okay, because you don't want a bunch of people following you who aren't actually going to engage, who aren't actually going to buy your products and services, who aren't actually going to share your content and, help put you in front of a large audience. So figure out who you're trying to communicate with, who is your ideal audience, and then communicate directly to them, knowing that doing that is going to alienate everybody else out there. It's going to push everybody else away. And that's okay, because that's completely a part of the process. All right, everyone. So that is going to be a wrap for today. This was another episode of the Public Relations Declassified live stream. If you guys are not already in our Facebook group, if you guys hit that QR code, that will take you straight into the group. You guys can go ahead and join there. But you can also find it just by searching Public Relations Declassified on Facebook. We've also got the private community, which we are going to be launching shortly. We're kind of in a soft beta launch behind the scenes. Some of the folks that you guys see popping in here from time to time are already members of that. I'll be talking about that shortly. But if there's anything in particular that you guys would like for me to cover, by all means, let me know in the group. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.